China's cracking down on foreign weather stations, claiming they're a threat to national security. But spy balloons are totally fine. China's seafood has a bloody backstory, and it's not the kind you think. And I never thought I'd say this, but is China's pollution actually stopping global warming? That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of. And you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So, remember when China assured the US that its totally civilian weather balloon wasn't a threat? Well, guess what? Apparently they are, because China now considers weather stations inside its borders a threat to national security. China's top spy agency is cracking down on foreign weather stations amid a push to stop data from leaving China. The Ministry of State Security said on its Weibo account that meteorological data constitutes an essential component of data security and resource security. It is closely linked to national food and ecological security, climate change, along with public interests. Yeah, those weather stations tracking climate change are definitely up to no good. Who knows what kind of information they might try to smuggle out? I mean, that's almost as bad as flying over China's nuclear sites. Oh wait, that's actually what China's weather balloon did to the US. But nevertheless, it was the US that was overreacting to that totally civilian weather balloon. I'm sure the irony will be totally lost on China, though. After all, hypocrisy is China's superpower. And speaking of China's hypocrisy, remember when China stopped buying Japanese seafood because it was supposedly unsafe? China claimed that Japan had polluted the ocean by releasing water from its Fukushima nuclear plant. China deemed it so unsafe that it basically banned all Japanese seafood. Never mind that Chinese fishermen are still fishing in the same waters, or that, as we discussed in this episode, China is doing way worse by releasing even more radioactive substances into the water than Japan. But as you can imagine, that really hurt the Japanese seafood industry. China was its top market, and it's not easy to replace a market that big overnight. Japan rolled out emergency relief for seafood exporters hurt by the ban, and the US military stepped in to buy at least some of its now massive surplus.
None of us are under the illusion that the armed forces replaces the Chinese market, but especially while China is embargoing and restricting all fish from Japan except for the ones that they fish in the Japanese waters, which they continue to do even though it's quote-unquote a public health risk, that we are going to use the capabilities of the armed forces of the United States here to start to purchase fish harvested by Japanese fishermen and the communities and the co-ops.
And who knows, maybe the rest of the US will stop buying more from Japan if it goes on sale. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna give me some sushi. Meanwhile, it seems that China's using Uyghur slave labor in its seafood industry. Yep, according to the Outlaw Ocean Project, thousands of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been sent to work in seafood processing plants. Shipments from companies employing Uyghurs went to dozens of American importers, including ones that supply military bases and public school cafeterias. I guess the US military was onto something when it started buying from Japan. The US has passed laws banning products made with Uyghur forced labor, which is why Congressman Chris Smith and Senator Jeff Merkley have written a letter to the Department of Homeland Security asking it to investigate the US supply chain. Well, if the US does have to ban seafood from China, I'm sure a certain country wouldn't mind filling the void. And after the break, China's working on an army of robots to take over non-existent jobs. Welcome back. China already uses slave labor to get stuff done, but come on, human slaves are so 3rd millennia BC. So it's working hard on something a little more modern, robot slaves. China has unveiled a plan to mass produce human-like robots, calling it a new engine for growth. A directive from China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology said that the robots are for working in harsh environments, manufacturing, as well as service sectors. Gee, you might think China had so many jobs it needed robots to fill them all. Instead of, the mass unemployment that's gotten so bad, China literally stopped reporting the data. But hey, at least China won't be sanctioned for using Uyghur slave labor anymore. And all those Uyghurs who don't have to work anymore can live happily ever after under tender, loving government care. And speaking of happy endings, Remember that protester who strung 2 banners over a bridge in Beijing during China's zero-COVID lockdowns?
An extraordinary sight in China's capital. 2 big banners attacking China's supreme leader and his policies hung on a busy overpass in Beijing. One of them reads, "Go on strike, remove dictator and national traitor Xi Jinping." A voice repeats the message on loudspeaker.
The man's name is Peng Li-fa, although he's probably better known as just Bridgeman. Besides his name, we haven't been able to find out really anything about his life. But what he did inspired a lot of people. He's been credited with starting the massive white paper protests that called for the end of the CCP and COVID lockdowns. People reposted his message on bathroom stalls throughout China and shared them through Apple AirDrop messages on public transportation. That is until Apple released an update that made that almost impossible. But since the 1-year anniversary of the bridge protest was last month, many are now wondering what happened to him. The short answer is we don't really know. He was arrested and no one seems to have been able to reach him since. Human rights magazine Bitter Winter reported that a usually reliable source close to the highest echelons of public security told Bitter Winter that Peng is alive and in a psychiatric hospital, but we have no hard evidence of this. Because clearly anyone who protests the CCP must have a mental problem. The party is great and glorious. That's why they also put Peng's wife and children under police surveillance too, because the party is glorious. According to Voice of America, authorities have yet to deliver to his family any legal documents related to his case, and his relatives and friends haven't been able to hire a lawyer to provide him with legal assistance. Yes, China's constitution protects freedom of speech and demonstration, just not that kind of speech and demonstration, apparently. While Peng may never be heard from again, his legacy lives on. He made it to Time's top 100 most influential people of the year this year, and he's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And after the break, is China's smog actually helping the planet? Welcome back. Another top tech entrepreneur in China has gone missing. According to state-run Cover News, the CEO of the Twitch-like streaming service Douyu, Chen Xiaojie, has disappeared. The South China Morning Post says he's being held incommunicado after authorities found porn on the Douyu platform. State media says he disappeared for weeks and that no one could reach him. So far, though, he hasn't publicly been charged with a crime. Now, Douyu, which is publicly listed on NASDAQ, says it's still operating normally, which raises the question, what does the CEO do all day if he can be missing for weeks and his company is just fine? But this is just another case of a Chinese CEO going AWOL in China. You know, normally I would be saying a CEO doesn't come with a lot of occupational hazards, but apparently in China it does. And you know what else is an occupational hazard in China? Breathing air. However, according to one new study, there's actually a real benefit to coating your lungs with coal dust. A Reuters review of temperature and air data from China shows that cutting pollution heats up the planet. Gee, did the Chinese government fund that study? Because I'm pretty sure China would love to say it's a leader in green tech and life-saving air pollution. Giving some background on Chinese efforts to fight air pollution, state media reports that the drive to banish pollution caused mainly by sulfur dioxide spewed from coal plants has cut SO2 emissions by close to 90% and saved hundreds of thousands of lives, Chinese official data and health studies show. Oh wait, that wasn't Chinese state media, that was Reuters. So it sounds like China's either paying for the study or manipulating its data, which would explain why China is so scared of foreign weather stations. Wasn't climate change data one of the reasons China's removing them? But Reuters also said that stripped of its toxic shield, which scatters and reflects solar radiation, temperatures rose by 0.7 degrees Celsius, which really explains this whole face kini phenomenon. If temperatures get any higher, Chinese women are going to be swimming with umbrellas. Reuters cited a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which said that without China's air pollution, global temperatures would have already catastrophically risen. So I guess we should all be grateful to China for all its efforts to pollute the environment, to save the environment. And this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. And these companies can get hacked, spreading my private information even more widely. For example, recently hackers broke into Seiko, the company that makes watches, and stole 60,000 items of personal data on customers. That included names, addresses, and phone numbers. Could have been yours. If a big company like that can be hacked, think about all the smaller ones that have your personal data that can also be hacked. So what can you do? Get as many companies as possible to delete your data off the internet. And that's what Incogni does for you. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 160 of these data brokers, with a lot more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code UNCENSORED will get 60% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.